Hi all, Stanky here. Last year I made a video about Metal Gear Solid's divisive remake, The Twin Snakes. I called it something like fixing gaming's worst remake. In the comments for that video, a ton of you rightfully pointed out, what about Resident Evil 3 Remake? Released in 2020, RE3 Remake was not made by the core Capcom team that did Resident Evil 2 Remake. While the RE2 Remake team was busy making RE4 Remake, development on Resident Evil 3 got handed off to M2, a smaller support studio made up of Capcom and Platinum employees. I wish I could tell you this was an underdog story where M2 rose to the occasion and blew fans away with an awesome remake, but sadly that is not the case. Among hardcore Resident Evil fans, Resident Evil 3 Remake is widely considered the worst in the remake series. It's a game that's lambasted for doing everything worse than its predecessor. But in this video, we're gonna put a positive twist on it. Why is it that Resident Evil 3 Remake is considered gaming's worst remake? And how could it theoretically be fixed? Let's jump in. This is the most common complaint, so let's get it out of the way first. RE3 Remake famously cut out a ton of content. Original Resident Evil 3 has 6 large areas: downtown, uptown, the police station, the clock tower, the park, and the dead factory. RE3 Remake instead has 5 small areas: uptown, the sewer, the police station, the hospital, the nest. Atmospheric locations like the park or the clock tower are gone. All of these awesome locations get left behind in favor of a linear sewer level? No one wants to hang out in a shit pipe! To make matters worse, the sewers and the nest are just reused content from RE2. Sure, the level designs are different, but you can just see all the RE engine assets they leveraged to make these new areas as quickly as possible. The downtown-uptown portions are a quarter of the size, so really this game only has 3.5 areas compared to the original 6. The removal of the dead factory is also a shame. In the original Resident Evil 3, the dead factory is this awesome industrial environment. It's this factory where Umbrella Corps has been disposing of zombie bodies secretly. It's industrial, rusty, and unsettling, and adds to the game's tone. But nope, this gets thrown out the window in the remake. Instead, you just go to another squeaky clean lab like in Resident Evil 2. When you have a remake, and they leave out large iconic areas like this, it removes a large part of the game's identity. Resident Evil 3 was special because it allowed players to explore Raccoon City for the first time, to see the city as it was falling apart. RE3 Remake simply does not deliver on this promise, and that makes it a failure from the jump. Ultimately, these changes make Raccoon City as a whole feel less interesting in the remake era. All these cuts and changes amount to a runtime of only 6 hours for Remake. That is 2 hours shorter than the frickin' PS1 game. Aside from cut content, the level design that replaces it is also worse. The best parts of Resident Evil games are being trapped in a space, exploring it, solving puzzles so you can leave that space. Their non-linear structure provides a sense of exploration. Resident Evil 3 Remake removes this entirely. You're walking down corridors, going either left and right, and there's no exploration here. A great example of this comes in the early downtown portion. There's this optional puzzle where you can get more inventory space. On my first playthrough, I thought, oh, I could just backtrack to this later. So later on, Nemesis is chasing me, and I still have this gym puzzle I have to do, so I'll just duck in here. Wait, what? I can't leave this room? The garage door closes and prevents backtracking. You're telling me you have a puzzle room that locks you out of finishing the optional puzzle? How do we fix this? How do we make Resident Evil 3 better from a level design perspective? Well, frankly, the first thing that needs to be done is the cut content needs to be restored. The clock tower, the park, and the dead factory need to be put in the game. The reason why these expansive locales are important is they allow players to backtrack, explore the city, and solve puzzles, like in the best Resident Evil games. By turning the entire game into linear hallways, you lose a key part of Resident Evil 3's identity, and that is antithetical to a remake. It's not just restoring the cut content, it's adapting the streets and puzzles to have that same feeling of a massive city that was present on the PlayStation 1. One of the main features of the original Resident Evil 3 is Nemesis. It's literally on the box. In 1999, Nemesis was a persistent threat, chasing players across the map, much like RE2 Remake's Mr. X. He's this awesome threat, a big hulking brute that'll run at you at full speed with a rocket launcher. Surely RE3 Remake captured this, right? They had all the work done with Mr. X. Our vulva-faced buddy surely is better this time around, right? Nope. Womp womp. In Resident Evil 3 Remake, Nemesis is reduced to a boss that shows up 2 or 3 times. He literally has less screen time than in the original. They removed the Nemesis from the remake of Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. And when our boy does appear, it is the most brain-dead gameplay sequence. You either run in a straight line, or you run around in circles in a combat arena and shoot him until he's dead. This Nemesis rooftop fight is the most bland boss I've ever seen. It amounts to shoot a generator, damage Nemesis, wait for the generator to recharge, rinse and repeat. Shoot the backpack to win! You can literally just run around in a circle for 20 minutes. The problem is, Nemesis is not a persistent threat. He's just a big, dumb guy you gotta shoot a bunch from time to time. There's no fun here. There's no threat that alters existing areas. You have a big, dumb boss that just turns into a lame zombie dog. So how do we fix this? Well, this answer actually becomes easier with our previous fix. In our version, since we replaced the level design, since the player will have to backtrack more through areas and the city will be more expansive, we could make Nemesis more like Mr. X. What if instead of appearing in specific moments, he becomes that persistent threat? Chasing Jill across the city, she would have to duck in and out of buildings to try to lose Nemesis, and then he would search, listening for the player, listening for gunshots or running. I would argue this makes Nemesis more scary than Mr. X in RE2 Remake, because in this hypothetical version, when he finds you, he'd run at you in full speed. He would be a fast-paced, persistent threat. Makes him far more interesting than Zombie Fido over here. The best Resident Evil games have a sense of place. I talked about this in another video, so go check that out. But in a nutshell, good Resident Evil games give you a place. You learn your way through that place by solving puzzles and backtracking. Horror is built through disruption, as a zombie appears in a hallway you cleared, or Mr. X pops out of nowhere and surprises you. Backtracking is essential to building horror. The problem with Resident Evil 3 Remake is the level designs are too simple because it wants to be an action game. Far too often, you're walking down a hallway in a straight line to go to the next story beat. The game tries to make it interesting by throwing zombies at you, but what ends up happening is the game becomes a boring zombie shoot-'em-up fest. And while the original Resident Evil 3 did have action, it by no means had boring Call of Duty zombies set pieces. Resident Evil 3 Remake is scared of puzzles and backtracking, and the game is less scary as a result. In our hypothetical remake, we're gonna fix this simply by reincorporating all the puzzles from the PS1 version. Every puzzle, if it were to return, from this dumb block-pushing one to the water sample puzzle, would enhance the game. Why? Because it would force the player to backtrack and explore the environment for puzzle solutions. From exploring the environment, scares can then happen organically as enemy placements change. There is this one scene in RE3 Remake I love. It's when Jill gets this big fucking railgun and shoves it in Nemesis's mouth.
Come on! Next time, take a fucking hit!
But how cool would this scene have been if this was someone who was terrorizing you more? How much more impactful would this have been if Nem was like Mr. X, a persistent ambient threat as you explore Raccoon City? Even when the game is at its best, RE3 Remake cannot escape the shadow of its predecessor, as the player is constantly reminded that this is the worst version. This game's just a bad remake. Resident Evil 3 Nemesis is a quiet game. It's a game about escaping a dead city as you walk through empty alleyways. Because of this, action pops when set pieces occur. The balance of quiet and loud builds horror beautifully. Resident Evil 3 Remake, on the other hand, is a dumb, loud action game, and it has to rely on combat and throwing enemies at you to keep the player engaged in its pathetic 5 to 6 hour runtime. When we talk about what makes a remake good, it is really simple. A remake has to understand the soul of a work and execute on it perfectly. RE3 Remake does not understand why the original game is special. The original Resident Evil 3 is atmospheric. All of these cool environments flesh out Raccoon City. It takes the brilliant Resident Evil formula and expands it amongst memorable city streets and dark alleyways. And Resident Evil 3 gets none of that right. It's a slapdash game that was created quickly so Capcom could brag about Q1 profits in 2020 or whatever. Simply put, it is the worst remake of all time. But hey, disagree? Can you think of a remake that's worse? Let me know in the comments down below. This has been Stanky. Love ya. Bye. Remember, this channel is home to Stanky opinions. Love what you saw? Hate what you saw? Drop a comment down below. And why not subscribe if you enjoyed the show? Thanks for me, Stanky, the CEO.